Okay, glad you're back. We had a good time in the garden yesterday, and today we're going to apply some of the things that we've been talking about. I have in front of me several of the things that we're going to use in our recipes today. We're going to talk a little bit more about meal planning. If you remember one of the days earlier, we did some planning and some playing with little paper pictures of foods, and we have those spread out all over the place. And we sorted them out and divided them into different categories and talked about how we could make balanced meals and meals that were more nutritious for us. Well, we're going to get into a little more detail today about how we actually get all of the nutrients, all of the things that make us strong and healthy. So I'm going to start out by asking you a question. I'm thinking all of you have heard someone talk about being on a low-carb diet. Probably heard it on the TV or somewhere, maybe heard your parents sitting around talking about it. So I have a question for you. Look at everything that's on the table and see if you can tell me which of the items in front of me are carbs, carbohydrates. Everybody did a good job picking out two things, the pasta and the macaroni and cheese, and the cake mix. Those are two kind of bready kinds of things. So now I'm going to switch the tables on you a little bit. I'm going to pick out the things that are not carbohydrates. Okay, let's see, tuna and the butter, and these are actually real eggs. They're not white. That's because they came from an actual farm. So this is not carbohydrate. Everything else is a carb. So would this be really yummy to eat every day? Just eggs and butter and tuna? Don't say yes, because that would be disgusting. Okay, so think about it. All of these foods are carbs. Should we say we're not going to ever eat any of these foods because they're carbs and they'll make us fat?
No.
No. Good answer, camera person. So let's talk about the different types of foods and what they do for our bodies and why we need all of them in moderation. All of these are carbohydrates, but they're different types of carbohydrates. There are other food groups as well. Carbohydrates can be breads. They can also be fruits and vegetables. I have mostly vegetables here. There's a little bit of fruit and applesauce, but fruits and vegetables, and sugars. Also, there are simple sugars and complex sugars. That's a lot of science, and we won't get into all of that. But just know that there are a lot of good foods out there, and carbs are not all bad for us. It wouldn't be a good idea if we ate just donuts every day. Oh, that sounds pretty good. Wouldn't be a good idea if we ate just donuts 3 meals a day every day, right? Well, at the same time, it wouldn't be a good idea if we ate just one vegetable. If we picked, I don't know, squash, and we ate just squash every day, 3 meals a day, that would be pretty disgusting, right? Same thing with apples or oranges or anything like that. You can't eat just one thing and eat it all the time. So we have to have some variety. Besides carbohydrates, there are some other food groups that are important for us, or nutrients that we need to talk about. One is protein. And you'll hear parents especially say, you need to eat your meat, you need to eat your protein. Protein comes from a lot of different sources. This is a can of tuna. I'm thinking you can probably tell me some other protein, right? Hamburger, steak. How about peanut butter? One of my favorites. So they're meats. They're also nuts and seeds and beans that give us protein. So there are lots of sources of protein. Eggs is another one. And dairy, we get some protein from our dairy products. So there are lots of ways that we can get protein, not just a piece of cow. There are lots of other fish. I forgot to mention fish. My tuna here. There's another category. Everybody knows what this is, right? Yummy, butter, put it on your bread and your potatoes and that sort of thing. Fats. Now we always hear about how bad fat is for us, but our body actually needs some amount of fat to function properly. It has a lot to do with our cell membranes and things that are really good. Cells kind of hold us all together and kind of are important. So we need to have some fat in our bodies, but the problem is we all get way too much of it. So yes, it's important, yes, it's good, but what's that word? Moderation. Yes, we want all things in moderation. So we're going to do some fun activities today. We're going to use some of these different foods and put them all together in a fun way and sample some cool recipes, and you get to do the cooking. Okay, I have before me a lovely bowl of macaroni and cheese made from a box. Of course, you can make it from scratch, but the whole point here is to be easy and convenient and things that we can get from the food pantry. So, we have some macaroni and cheese. Didn't show you how to make it. I'm assuming pretty much everybody knows how to make it. And if your parents let you use the microwave or the stovetop, you can make it yourself, but only if Mom and Dad or whoever's watching you in the house lets you do it. This would be great leftover too, so if you have some left at night, you can use this and make something really good for your lunch the next day. Now, I've got some things here that you can add to your macaroni and cheese to make it a lot healthier and taste a lot better. I've got some frozen vegetables. You could always use canned or fresh. Broccoli, and I've heated up some of that here. Spinach, green peas. All these come in cans too, or fresh. Here I've got some canned tomatoes and some green beans. Got our can of tuna, remember, protein. You could also use some diced ham or some other meat that you might have around the house, hot dog, something like that. I've got some fresh vegetables here. Don't know that you'd want to use all of those, but they just look really pretty and they came out of the garden this week. Here I have some tomatoes. Remember the other day we had some yellow tomatoes on our sandwiches. Just for something different, I wanted to show you that. That's a yellow tomato. It tastes pretty much just like a red tomato, just looks a little different. And that will look kind of strange in our yellow pasta, but we'll try that. So to make my pasta special, my mac and cheese, I'm going to add some broccoli, lots of broccoli, because broccoli's like the food of kings. And then I'm going to put some of these nice tomatoes on top. And remember, you could always just open a can of tomatoes, but if you have fresh is always a good idea. So there we go. I'm going to stir that together, and that's going to be my lunch. We're also going to have cake. That will be in a few minutes.
Alright, so right now we're making a cinnamon crumb cake. We have already preheated our oven and sprayed our baking pan with baking spray so that things won't stick. Now we are going to start putting things together. This is one of those recipes where you're taking what's on the back of a box and then kind of doing something different with it. So the back of the box says you need 1 1/3 cups water, which I've already measured out, 1/3 cup vegetable oil, but we're going to use applesauce instead because that's healthier for you, and then 3 large eggs, which we have from our own chickens. And so the first thing we do is blend the mix from our box. Alright, so cake mix goes in our nice bowl, and you could use pretty much any flavor of cake mix you wanted. We're using the plain yellow cake mix since I personally think that that's going to taste better with cinnamon and brown sugar on top. But it's totally up to you. You can do whatever you want. Alright, so then we put in our water. And we're going to need to measure out our applesauce since it doesn't come in 1/3 size cups. Actually, if I recall correctly, this is 1/2 cup. Well, it's pretty close. Alright, plop. And then our eggs. And while we're at it, we should have a discussion about eggs. These particular eggs have really thick shells, so they're kind of hard to crack. There's more than one way to crack an egg. The way I do it is I tap it on the counter with 1 or 2 good taps. And you see there's kind of a hole there. I poke my thumbs in and do like that. Probably you're less likely to make a mess if you tap it on the side of the bowl, but I've never been able to make that work. I'm just deficient that way. So 3 eggs here. This one's kind of a funny little shape. Our eggs are often funny little shapes. Alright, let me rinse this yolk off my hand real quick. You pretty much always want to rinse the egg yolk off your hand before you do anything else, because raw egg yolks have all kinds of interesting bacteria in them. Alright, so now that that's mixed together, we take our handy dandy blender here and we get that out of the way so we don't crash anything over. And just swirl it all together. Usually the back of the box will say to use a specific setting, but every blender is different, so you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. Let's see, and it says about 30 seconds. Now it says beat at medium speed for a couple minutes, which means you're just getting the clumps out. I'm not very patient. Alright, I'm going to set there, and then now 1.5 tablespoons of cinnamon. And Mom was just reminding me a minute ago that 1.5 teaspoons is half a tablespoon. I probably wouldn't have known that if she hadn't said it. Oh, hey, that worked out just about perfectly. Alright, so there's your cinnamon. And for cinnamon, it doesn't matter if you're real accurate with how much you put in there because it's just flavoring. But with most things, you want to be pretty careful about that because it will make a difference in the way that your whatever bakes. Alright, and then we have 1/3 cup of brown sugar. Presumably, you could also use regular sugar, but brown sugar tastes better. So I'm just going to use a fork because that's pretty easy. I'm going to eject those. Get them out of our way. Pouring half-ish of our batter. I'm just going to see how well that spreads out because I'm not really sure what half is. That's one of those things you just kind of have to figure out as you're going. Oh darn, I got cake batter on my finger. And you can use your hands since presumably you washed your hands before you did this. If you ever had like a chocolate layer cake or something, this is kind of what you're doing here. That just makes the taste a little more even, so you can enjoy it more. And yes, that is making strange little patterns, but it'll be okay. Might make it kind of marbly in the middle, that'd be really cool. If you move your thing around like this when you're pouring, it doesn't all pile up in the middle and bake gooey. trying to get the edges. It's a little difficult to do without making a terrible mess. Living dangerously. Alright, since I have a fork handy, I'm just going to use that to scrape the ball. Normally you'd use a spatula, but I'm improvising my kitchen tools a little bit. Okay, I think that's about as well as I'm going to get it with a fork. It's the reason you normally have a spatula. And so now we're going to take the rest of our cinnamony sugary goodness and sprinkle it on top here. And if you get a clump like that, you might want to spread it out. Yeah, it doesn't hurt anything if you get your fingers just a little bit battery. All you need to do is wash them off. And one of the great things about this recipe and some of the other cake mix recipes that we have in your cookbook, they are really, really easy to do and they taste really good. Now, of course, you always want to ask your parents about using an oven, but depending upon their policy with the oven, you can probably do the whole thing yourself. Speaking of the oven, we're going to get there in a minute. Alright, so it says to bake for 30 to 35 minutes. In other words, basically half an hour. And anytime you're putting something in the oven, you want to make sure the door is open all the way so it doesn't flip back on you. That would not be a good thing. And of course you don't want to touch those metal bars because that would not be a good thing either. Alright. And now our cake is baking. And just a little tip, one way you can know it's done if you aren't sure is to take a fork or a toothpick and stick it in there. And then take it out, and if there's any goo left on your toothpick, you know it needs to cook a little more. If there isn't, then you're done. Ta-da!